Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fire and Rescue Authority Community Safety Committee. First on the agenda, apologies, and we're all here, so we'll move on pretty swiftly. Item 2 is declarations of interest, if any members have any. And we don't, thank you. Item 3 are the minutes of the previous meeting from October. They are pages 3 to 10 of your agenda. I'm happy to move those. Has anybody got any questions or comments on the minutes?
Chair, just one update regarding the item that was on safeguarding disclosure and borrowing update. Members fed back around the request that we looked at enhanced checks for our members of staff. That has now progressed, and we are going through consultation in terms of that being enacted. So we'll be looking at enhanced checks for all of our frontline staff who have contact with communities. Thank you for that.
Thank you, David. Anyone else on minutes? Wonderful. Can we accept those as a true and accurate record then, please?
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much. Right, then we're on to the meat of it. Pages 11 to 24 is the service delivery performance report. As I say, starting on page 11. I don't know who's going first. Andy?
Lovely.
Is it you?
Yeah.
You?
Self-start, yes. Thank you. So the report this month covers the first 3 quarters of 23-24, so up until right to the very end of December for this report. So to start off with, then, so far this year we've attended a total of 8,175 incidents, which is a 8.8% decrease on the same 3 quarters of last year. Now, as I know you're all very well aware, last year numbers were high because of the hot summer that we had, so we are looking likely to have less calls this year. Quarter 3 this year has had a bit of an increase in numbers because of the flooding. We've had some significant incidents over past 3 months, which again I know you're all aware of. So it looks like we'll be probably just tipping over 10,000 incidents in 23-24 compared to the 11,343 that we had the year before. Figure 1 under 2.3 shows that monthly comparison, and there you can see in October, November, December this year the numbers of incidents are slightly increased on the same months last year because of the flooding that we've had. Moving on to 2.4 to show the breakdown of incident types over the last 12 months. So fires really have followed the typical pattern of being lower in the autumn and winter, peaking in the spring and staying relatively high in the summer. False alarms have shown a gradual increase over this year, peaking in October at 590. And special service calls tend to be relatively stable throughout the year and are averaging 227 per month. Figure 3 under 2.5 shows the breakdown per district, and sort of not surprisingly, City of Nottingham experienced by far the most incidents, like it always does each year, approaching 2,500 so far this year, Rushcliffe being the least, excuse me, at 614. 2.6 and figure 4 shows a breakdown priority type, and just for a reminder that our P1 incidents are those that are the most significant. These are the ones that pose an immediate threat to human life or pose a risk of severe human injury, and where our intervention has that potential to save life and reduce harm. So thankfully these are obviously the bar on the chart, which is the smallest, and P2 incidents pose a serious hazard and a high-risk threat to either the environment, society, property or heritage risks. And our P3 incidents, which are the highest bar on the graph, they're the majority ones. I won't say, I'm looking at a colour copy and I know you're not, so apologies. Pose a potential hazard to human life, the environment, society, property and heritage, but it's a confirmed low hazard to human life. So you can see the trends there, which remain fairly constant throughout the year. Now, 2.7, a key part of our CRMP, as you know, is to attend incidents within an average of 8 minutes, 480 seconds. Now, during the reporting period, the average attendance time has been over this at 8 minutes 16. Now, we've discussed these issues before around the fact that we believe that part of the problem that we've had this year has been linked to the new appliance mobile data terminals. And it's hoped that we've had a number of recent software updates, and we are now confident that the mobilising issue that we were experiencing has been resolved, and it was resolved in December. And figure 5 under 2.7 really shows that drop, where the attendance time in December's have been significantly less than the months before. So we think where we thought the new mobilising terminal software was causing a slight problem here, the data currently does seem to back up that notion, and things seem to be improving. So the hope is that in quarter four we will see an improvement. 2.8 talks about on-call station availability. Our availability for on-call is averaging 85.2%. Our service target is 85%, so we're just operating above target. We're currently placed fourth nationally in terms of on-call availability, so we are doing relatively well here. Since April, 8 of our on-call sections have performed above the 85% target. However, we have been struggling with availability this year at both Harworth and Southwell. Now, we know Southwell is often year on year one of our targeted stations where we do struggle to hit that 85%. At both stations this year, we have been suffering from long-term sickness of a supervisory manager at both Southwell and Harworth, which has impacted these figures. Now, thankfully, both the individuals involved are now due to come back to work. So hopefully we'll see an improvement at those two stations. Now, we've talked previously about the challenges that there are nationally around on-call recruitment, and I'd like to sort of reiterate I think we touched on it last time, that we've had quite a successful year in terms of recruiting on-call staff. We've had 34 new on-call staff join us this year, 12 of which have just started a course in the last couple of weeks, which is taking place up at Mansfield. So hopefully things are improving in that area. Now, as previously requested, we do have a focus on the day shift crewing station now. Obviously, it is only Retford now that Ashfield has gone back to whole time. So 2.9, 2.10 deal with some data around Retford. So over a 24-hour period at Retford up until 31st of December, the on-call appliance has been available 78.4% of the time. Now, this is a reduction on where we were last year. Last year, we were performing really well at Retford on-call at 87.1%, so we have seen a dip in performance there this year. During the daytime, between 8 in the morning and 7 at night, we have one on-call appliance available at Retford. Now, this has been available for 60.8, so just short of 61% of the time, and again, that's quite a drop on where we were last year. And over the night time, we have at least one on-call appliance has been available for 93.3% of the time, and the two appliances have been available for just 14.5% of the time, which again, both are drops on where we were last year. Now, the only positive thing I can say around that is of those 34 firefighters that we managed to recruit into the on-call this year, 5 of them are due to go to Retford, which will obviously hopefully help with availability going forward into next year. Under 2.12, Table 1 shows the availability of our whole-time appliances. Now, we target that all of our whole-time appliances are available for at least 98% of the time. Now, there are genuine reasons why they become unavailable, and it's because of things such as mechanical fault or servicing, insufficient crewing levels, where crews have to replenish kit and equipment because they become contaminated at incident and such like. But I'm happy to report every single one of our whole-time appliances have exceeded that target in terms of availability so far this year. Now, a key part of our ongoing commitment is around ensuring our assets and resources are mobilised effectively. So the next few areas deal with the metrics from our joint fire control. I'm happy to report on 2.14 that the first metric, which deals with around calls being answered within 7 seconds, target being 96%. The figure 7 there shows our achievement over the last 8 quarters, and the performance in quarter 2. We always report on this a quarter behind, so this is up to the end of quarter 2, has met that 96% being answered within 7 seconds. Similarly, average call handling time for our P1 and P2 incidents, those most serious incidents where there's a threat to life or threat to property, the target is that they're dealt with in 89 seconds from time of call to the appliance being mobilised. And again, quarter 2 has had really significant performance where they've actually performed 7 seconds better than the target figure. So happy to report that. And then the final metric for control is around the availability of the mobilising system. So in quarter 2, the system was available 95.4% of the time. Our target is 99% of the time, so we're slightly below that target. Now, we've discussed this previously, where this is often relatively minor issues, but it is what we would class as being unavailable. So it might be that pages weren't working at a time for officers, but they're still available through mobile phone calls. So we have backup systems in place to make sure assets can be mobilised, but the system isn't just working as 100% effectively and efficiently as it could do. We are continuing, as ever, to work with our mobilising system provider to make improvements to the system.
Thank you. Any members got any questions on the response section? Nick?
Well, I think it's pretty good news, isn't it, generally? I mean, the only issue's record, and that's getting resolved, hopefully. So, other than that, I think it's looking pretty decent. Thank you.
Yeah, I think even where there are challenges, as you say, there are plans in place to
working on it.
resolve.
Yeah.
I'm particularly pleased about 2.12. That's stunning, 99.9% of the time availability. That's great news. Nigel?
Just on the recruits, the 34 new recruits, how does that compare to the applicants? So,
In terms of the makeup of the applicants, or
no, in numbers basically. So, how many applicants would you
I
get
see.
to receive the 34?
that's very quick. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can come back next time and discuss that. Yeah.
So
in terms
are
of
you
our
getting
success
the
rate.
similar
Yes.
application numbers to previous?
I think this year has been our best year in terms of the number of people that have been interested in applying, and then actually the suitability of those individuals. Because we get people who would like to be an on-call firefighter, but unfortunately they live too far outside of the turnout area of the state. That happens a lot. So often we get a lot of applicants who are sifted out at quite an early stage, unfortunately. But it's the best year that we've had in terms of number of people expressing an interest and the number of people who are actually converted into successful applicants. And it's kind of testament to the work that our on-call support team do in really driving that recruitment. But I can certainly put some more facts and figures around that data if you would like me to, and bring it back next time.
So the ones who are sifted out from other areas, do you retain details for potentially future?
Yeah, we do, because things are changing, and we are working currently around potentially revising some of that turnout area of the station, because traditionally we work on you have to live within 5 minutes of the station, but the reality is in some areas, particularly our more rural areas, we could expand that slightly, because that appliance could still be potentially the second appliance to an instance, so we could expand that locally at certain areas. So yes, we keep information on record so we can go back to those people if our parameters change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting, Nigel, we were talking about whole-time recruits as well previously, and that's a record turnout. Did we say 400 odd applicants for this wave?
We've got over 170 now been shortlisted to the final selection process, which starts on Monday. So that's for 20 new trainees who start in April, and a potential further course later in the year as well. So
270 out of 400.
Yeah, been shortlisted down, so and that'll be shortlisted down to a final 20 now. So, but as Andy says, the work that goes into that recruitment, especially around the on-call, because it is something that historically communities don't understand. They don't understand that they've got an on-call fire appliance in their area. They don't understand that they can be part of that team. So there's a lot of work from the on-call support team being done in local areas, and particularly targeted areas like Southwell, where we do need people.
And it's really good news on the retained. If you look at Hucknall and Warsop and some of those others, they're at 100% or 99.5% there. That's massively improved. Right, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to prevention and protection.
Okay.
You, Bryn?
That's me.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you. So moving on, 2.17, prevention. You can see 2.17, between April and January of this year, we've completed just over 12,000 safe and well visits. We set ourselves a challenging target this year of 14,000 safe and wells. If we complete 14,000, that would be the most we've ever completed in any financial year. And we're well on course to do that. We're over 83%, as you can see there, towards that total of 14,000. So that's really, really good news. One of the key metrics that we'll look at with safe and wells is it's not just carrying out the safe and wells. We're trying to target the safe and wells at those most at risk from fire. As you can see in 2.18, over half delivered to over 65s and 43% to disabled persons, because we know that those groups are the most at risk of fire due to their age, possibly due to frailty, or due to the disability. They can't get out if the fire is discovered. So that's really, really where we target our resources. 2.19, I suppose our flagship youth engagement events, a safety zone that we run throughout the summer period really. In 23-24, we ran one event at Ashfield Fire Station that was attended by, close on to 500 pupils, and another 2-week event for the city in the south of the county, where we got 1,400 pupils from schools across the city and county. Now, that's not just the fire and rescue service. We work really, really closely with our partners, so it's a multi-agency community safety event, not just focusing on fire. And you can see in 2.2, it's Nottinghamshire Police, it's the Transport Police in terms of rail safety, National Grid in terms of substations and not touching overhead lines. We look with dogs, the Dogs Trust, National Lifeboat Institution in terms of water safety, VIA for road safety, and the ambulance service do an excellent first aid introduction for the young people in terms of CPR and dangers, keeping themselves safe, and then administering first aid. So it's I know there's an open invite for yourselves to go to those, and we'll prompt you again over the summer months. But it really is heartwarming to see so many children receiving so much community safety in a compressed period. It really is excellent. In addition to Safety Zone, the education team have also targeted certain schools, which we're now calling Safer Schools, in terms of over 1,300 pupils, and we've been focusing on school assemblies and delivering messages around fire safety, prevention of false alarms and hoax calls. If we get a spate of hoax calls in a particular area, we will then target that local school, whether it's primary or secondary, generally secondary schools, that will go in and talk about hoax calls and the consequences of those hoax calls that they can have on the emergency services. We also run Biker Down, and again, you may not be aware what Biker Down is. It's an initiative we've been running for a few years now, and it's run by firefighters, and it comes on the back of a lot of cyclists, motorcyclists, go out in groups, certainly in the summer months, and if one of them is sadly involved in a road traffic collision, is the correct procedure to keep them safe and try and administer first aid. We've got to be really careful removing helmets and safety equipment so we don't cause further injuries from cyclists, motorcyclists. So that intervention is really, really based on peer support, really, friends helping friends if they've been involved in an RTC on a motorbike. Really well received. It's on the back of tragic incidents, as you can probably imagine. We've got a lot of firefighters that are keen motorcyclists. And I suppose it's worth adding on that we've just agreed that we're going to do the Easter egg run again, which you may be aware takes place from the Forest Recreation Ground to Mansfield Fire Station, where we get hundreds of motorcyclists. And of course we use that as an opportunity to deliver safety messages yet again, while we've got a captive audience and we're surrounded by chocolate eggs. So that will be taking place over the Easter weekend. In December, as you can probably imagine, we work with Nottinghamshire Police, and the police don't like to call it a drink drive campaign because their view is it's a drink drive campaign all year, but we really highlighted the dangers of drink driving to over 100 people in the run up to the festive period. Like I say, we've got further events planned for Easter with the motorcycling community. Is there any questions on prevention before I move on to protection?
Anyone?
No, it looks pretty good. Just from in terms of the safe and well, that's looking extremely good, isn't it? I think in terms of goals, and there's loads of really good work there, so that's great. The only thing that occurred to me, I was thinking about the drink drive campaign. That sounded a bit old-fashioned here. I remember years ago, when I used to watch network TV more than we do now, on Netflix, and you used to get this big campaign in December about don't drink drive, and it seems to be less centralised that now. I don't think I've seen much of it, and obviously we've got much more prevalence of drug use, I think, as well. So I'm just wondering, obviously in terms of accidents and statistics, what we do about that and how we actually prevent it. Because I think there's possibly more people drug driving than there were in the past. And I know what the police are saying about December, but I mean, common sense would a lot of people go on Christmas dues, don't they? Think I'll only have one or two, and then I'll drive back to the county if I've been out in the city, and they're probably over the limit. So I'm just wondering about that.
I think when they looked at the previous drink drive campaigns of yesteryear, yes, they had a real big push on drink driving, but you're right, the dynamics have changed and there is a lot more drug driving now. One of the things we do throughout the year is target sixth form colleges and colleges of further education. So people who have just started driving or are on the cusp of driving, we go around and we do interventions there, and we probably have as much success. It's difficult to measure success, isn't it? Because you're trying to measure something that's not happened. But it's that feel-good factor that we feel that we're doing the right thing by going around talking to these young people about the dangers of drink and now drug driving. So yeah, it's an all year round sort of activity that we're doing in conjunction with the police. Okay, moving on to protection then. This year we've set ourselves a real stretch target of 1,500 fire safety audits, and if you remember from previous community safety committees, I've given an advisory that we probably won't reach 1,500 because we don't have enough fire safety inspectors to be able to deliver that. That said, between the 1st of April and the 31st of December, we've completed 956 fire safety audits. Some of those, nearly 300 have required informal action, and 48 have required formal notices. That's enforcement action, legal enforcement action. And you can imagine the amount of work that generates to be legally compliant, because potentially they are criminal offences. If you look at figure 13, and I appreciate it's not in colour on yours, but the far right column, which spikes up every month in 23-24, we've completed month on month more fire safety audits than we've ever completed. So I'm really, really proud of the work of the department. That has come about by an increasing number of inspectors. Some of the inspectors that we've got are now competent and qualified, so they can count towards audits, and it's a real, real success story. In addition to those over 900 fire safety audits, you're probably aware that our crew and watch managers, they're the operational supervisory managers we have on fire appliances. We've now trained them to be warranted officers for low-level, what we call business safety checks, basically going around small business premises, shops, etc. Things that are not probably on the radar of the protection department, which tends to be the larger premises, the more high-risk premises. But we recognise that our operational crews have got potential capacity to deliver further work in that area. But what we're finding as well, and quite rightly, is that the supervisory managers on the fire appliance are uncovering fire safety issues, serious fire safety issues, and then lower risk premises that require interventions by a more senior fire safety inspecting officer. So it's quite right, we expected that to happen, but it is taking some capacity from our normal inspection regime. But it's all good work, you know, it's the right work that we should be doing, but it will impact the numbers. So in terms of the number of fire safety audits, year on year, we're not going to keep seeing an increase like we have in 23-24. It will start to taper off because of the other work that we're doing. And a lot of it is how we record this work. We can't record a business safety check twice. We can't record the fact that a supervisory manager has undertaken an audit and a fire safety inspector. It's only one audit, unfortunately, in terms of recording figures, but it's the right work to do. I suppose that's my professional opinion on that. We set ourselves a target of doing 1,000 business safety checks, and between April and December we've done 751. So we're pretty close to getting that by the end of the year. Myself and Andy have come up with a campaign. We've done it previously, the 12 Days of Christmas, which is probably not as it sounds. 12 Days of Christmas is focused on retail premises, because we know it's a peak time for the retail trade, obviously. The footfall should be the highest throughout the year, but we also know that their stock levels are at the highest levels. And what we're finding is sometimes inadvertently they're blocking means of escape, they're blocking fire exits, and we want to make sure that our communities are really safe when they're visiting those premises at peak time with the maximum footfall and the maximum amount of stock and combustible stock in the premises. So operational crews and fire safety inspectors have been around doing our 12 Days of Christmas campaign, making sure that everybody's safe over the festive period. Moving on, 2.26, and again it just gives you a flavour of what the fire protection department do in addition to just doing the fire safety audits, which is crossing the threshold into those non-residential premises. They're doing post-fire inspections, so when our colleagues in response, when they attend an incident, if it's at a commercial premise, we will follow that up to see why they've had a fire, has there been a breach of fire safety regulations, what's happened, what's occurred, is the full standards there. We follow up complaints. You can see over 200 complaints that we've received from members of the public who've got concerns about fire safety in those premises. We've issued 34 enforcement notices, 19 prohibition, and again, next time I come back to report to you, there will be a lot more prohibition and enforcement notices issued. We've got a lot more in the pipeline because we're doing our job. We don't like to enforce, we don't like to prohibit, we have got a very softly approach, but if people don't work with us and don't comply, then unfortunately we're left with no option but to take our powers that we've got for enforcement action. But that's not the culture that we've got within protection. It's very much work with us. All we want is the premises and people to be safe in those premises. And of course, building control, a lot of buildings still taking place, particularly in the city, and we're asked to comment on those Licensing, again, a big issue, particularly in the city, and consultations including Ofsted and Care Quality Commission in terms of residential care homes. Anything on those before I move on?
Just to say, the way you've articulated that, it's a very positive message, and it's really good to hear. So I think there's a lot of silence in the room because the level of detail that you've gone into, plus kind of the lesson learned approach that you've kind of discussed quite a lot, is good to see that's that constant evolution. Thank you.
So 2.27 then, that focuses on the total number of false alarms that we've attended. So just over 3,000 false alarms, which is a 14% increase, but that is of all false alarms. So we determine false alarms as false alarm malicious, false alarm good intent, and false alarm apparatus. So if I give you a very quick counter through, malicious is a genuine attempt to get us out when there's not a fire. So it's somebody that's decided it's, for whatever reason, it's a good idea to mobilise the fire service to a non-existent incident. Fortunately, pretty rare, 79 incidents that we've had. Technology allows us to know which mobile phone it is. We do have the ability with colleagues in BT to, if it's a persistent offender, to stun that mobile, particularly pay-as-you-go mobile, so we can disconnect that from the network if it's a persistent caller. And technology has really helped. The old days of the phone box, it's probably long gone, where it was the same phone box outside of secondary school, school closing time. Those days have moved on, so we do get very few, really, in fairness, in comparison. False alarm good intent is where a member of the public has probably seen what they think is smoke or a fire. We've attended, and it may be steam from a boiler or some other reason. It's a good intent. Of course, we don't mind attending good intent calls because the intent's been there. And then we move on to false alarm apparatus, and I know that's been subject to a report here in the past. We set ourselves a target to reduce the number of unwanted fire signals by 3%. Between the 1st of April and the 31st of December, we've responded to 2,875 unwanted fire signals, and that is a 13% increase since the previous year. That also mirrors a national trend that we're seeing, so that is not unique to Nottinghamshire, that is the same across England. All fire and rescue services are seeing, I think it was a 14% increase, but so we may be 1% below the national average on that, but we're all seeing an increase in the number of false alarm apparatus calls. Figure 15 shows that each month again and again we are seeing more calls. Myself, Damien, and the protection department have done quite a bit of work to really break down what's behind this, what can we do, how do we improve the figures. 2.29, what we've looked at there is this, of the nearly 3,000 unwanted fire signals, nearly 600 are from non-residential premises. And only 343 are from hospitals, which used to be the biggest contributor to unwanted fire signals. If you can imagine the estate that we've got of NHS in Nottinghamshire, of the University Hospitals, Kingsmill, Bassett Law, Newark, that's a huge, huge estate to only have 342 calls for the amount of detectors and a 24/7 operation. So we work really, really closely with the hospitals. Nearly 2,000 were classed as residential premises, and this is where our issue is. Because so we've got 2,800 unwanted fire signals, close to 2,000 are from residential premises. Now we've got no fire protection powers about any of the installed systems in residential premises. Our powers of enforcement, our powers of correction only apply in commercial non-residential premises. So if you as a homeowner want to install a fire alarm system, you can absolutely, and have it monitored, and if it goes off, you will mobilise a fire appliance. And there's nothing that the Fire and Rescue Service per se can do about that because it's outside of regulation. That said, 645 are single occupancy homes or bungalows, which is telecare lifeline systems, and they're installed, and an increasing number are being installed, and they're not, I'll refrain from using the word problem because they're not a problem. The activations are absolutely vital to us, because unfortunately some of the fire deaths, which we'll report on the next committee meeting, we've been alerted to from these telecare systems. So in essence what you've got elderly vulnerable people with a telecare system and a smoke alarm connected. If they do burn the toast or burn the whatever they're cooking, it will activate it. If the telecare provider do not get a response from that individual, they will mobilise. And a lot of the time we have been mobilised and the flat or the house has been fully involved in fire, or unfortunately it's been a fatality. So we can't not attend these premises because these are the most vulnerable in society. and that is causing us a challenge, not just here, but nationally as well. Reassuringly, if it's non-domestic premises, we do have powers. We can do things about that. And every time an alarm goes off, we will write to it, a non-commercial premises, and outline their responsibilities in terms of fire safety. Fourth occurrence, we'll send one of our business safety advisors to work with them in a very sort of collaborative manner to see if we can improve the safety of the premises, make sure that they're aware of the obligations under law, how to make the premises safe. If we get a sixth occurrence, we send a fire safety inspector and we carry out an audit of that premises, because generally, if the alarm has gone off and keeps going off on 6 occasions, they've probably got other fire safety issues in that premises that we need to have a look at. So that's the rationale that we've got. We set a 2.31, we set a CRMP reduction target for unwanted lift rescues. We are slightly down on lift rescues. Again, very, very small numbers, 141 lift rescues, not a particular issue for the service. 2.32 down, again, making you aware of the Building Safety Act is now in. The Building Safety Act came on the back of Grenfell. We have now seconded one of our fire safety inspectors with Home Office funding to what we're calling a multidisciplinary team. So the multidisciplinary teams are going to have professionals from building control, fire safety in the housing sector that are going to look at high-rise residential buildings. They're viewing it as a cradle-to-grave approach in terms of brand new buildings all the way through its life. We'll have this multidisciplinary team that will be looking at the safety and the maintenance of the buildings. But you can imagine there is a huge amount of building stock. They are a national team, so they're not just focused on Nottinghamshire. Ours is classed as the East Midlands team. The East Midlands team comprises of Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire because we are the two counties that have got predominantly high-rise residential buildings. Derby, Lincoln, etc. don't have that high-rise stock like we have in Nottingham. We're led to believe by the HSC that they will focus their attentions on the main metropolitan areas of London, as you can probably imagine, which has got the majority of high-rise stock in the UK, Birmingham and Manchester, prior to moving to the provincial cities such as Nottingham. But I'll keep you updated how that work progresses and where they're going to go with that. We've also been given some new powers under the Fire Safety England regulations, and that is for the responsible persons to inform us if they've got a building above 18 metres of height of any issues that they've got with fire safety in those buildings. So if the lift doesn't work, if the dry riser has an issue, wet riser, they must inform them if it's going to be out of use for more than 24 hours. So that myself and colleagues in response with Andy, we can look at either sending more fire appliances and looking at a different tactical approach to fighting fires in that premises because it's not performing as it should. And we continually work with colleagues in NFCC looking at new national guidance and issues that we're occurring in Nottingham to inform best practice, and they can lobby government for changes in fire safety legislation. That, I think, sums it up.
Thank you, Bryn. Bryn, just going back to the unwanted fire signals, the 1,350-ish that are domestic that aren't Telecare or Lifeline, and we don't have powers with them. What do we do in terms of education if it's somebody who's got a repetitive system problem?
Well, so initially when you look at it as an unwanted fire signal, you may think it's a waste of our time, but a lot of the time we're attending these premises and we're finding vulnerabilities in those residential premises. So if it's away from Telecare and it's away from the Lifeline systems, they're generally within the care system. But some of these other residential premises, the alarms have gone off and we're finding people in need. We're finding with people with safeguarding issues, people that have an alarm that's linked, but they're not actually linked in with the wider care system. So we do a safe and well while we're there, so it's not actually a complete waste of our time. We then have trained all the crews in terms of referrals, so there's a referral pathways to put them into the care system and make sure they're getting the support. So it's not a case of you've got a 5-bedroom detached house and the alarm keeps going off and they won't do anything about it. That's not probably what we're seeing really. The truth is a lot of it is social housing, a lot of it is people in deprivation, people that do need help that we're attending. So there is some good that comes from it, in fairness.
Very helpful, thank you. Anybody else got any questions, comments, Nick?
I think based on that, it is issues outside of our control, isn't it? Because I think with the way the care system is and an ageing population, you are going to have more of these alarm systems, and they are going to go off. I set mine off the other day, but I had a long shower without opening the window. Yeah. But I'm not a vulnerable person, so I'd answer the phone. But there's a number of reasons why that's the case, and I think you know, with the issues around care, etc. at the moment, and there are cuts, etc. That's totally outside of our control. I don't know what we can do, but it's good to hear that we're actually following things up and with the appropriate authorities. I think that's pretty good. I mean, obviously, I've got some concerns around buildings and regulation of being nationalised, but I don't know if we can do a lot here in terms of it. I'd rather it was inspected more locally. We've got a lot in the city shooting up, particularly student accommodation, and there's more and more and more, and obviously we require more resources to deal with that, I would have thought, because the number of those sort of high-rise buildings, particularly south of the city centre, is more than quadruple, doesn't it? Near where the London Road Fire Station is, fortunately, it's tons of the things. And it's that's a concern with how quickly they're going up. But I don't know what else we can do or say about that.
Damien, do you want to take?
Yeah, no, just to the point you make, Councillor, in terms of the approach to care in home, and particularly a move away from residential care in some areas, and it's really important that we are part of that consultation. So obviously the City Council at the moment have got some consultation on proposals, so we are forming a response to that. But it presents a real challenge, both in terms of demand for our resources, in terms of the alarms that Bryn's talked about, but also that risk to vulnerable people, and making sure they've got the right provision around that, and we're working closely with City Council around that as well. So just to really reiterate the point we made.
Anyone else? No, thank you very much, Bryn. Very detailed. And the item 5, which starts on page 25, is the update on learning from the Manchester Arena inquiry. Damien?
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware we brought a paper just under a year ago to members around the Manchester Arena Inquiry Volume 2 recommendations. So Manchester Arena Inquiry was split down into subsections, and Volume 2 looked specifically at the response of emergency services to the tragic incident back in May 2017. Now, there were a lot of recommendations came from that, and it was important. We've got a well-established approach to learning from incidents both locally and nationally, but it's important that we take on board this risks that were highlighted, where Manchester particularly were criticised, their work with partner agencies, and especially that blue light response. So members will be aware we had a similar response after the Grenfell inquiry, and we've taken a similar approach to making sure that we enact those areas. At the meeting in April last year, we told members that we would bring updates, and this is the first of those significant updates. Now we've made some progress in terms of those recommendations. So how we've addressed the recommendations has been broken into two parts, and that's one, looking solely and essentially at the improvements Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue can make, and the breakdown recommendations from that. The second part of that is how then we can work as a local resilience forum, the LRF, and how we, with our blue light partners, can make those improvements as well, and that breaks down the report which I'll present. So from the internal, from NRFRS perspective, there was an action plan undertaken against the recommendations to make sure that we had a comprehensive cover of those. And from the review and Volume 2 inquiry, we've identified 53 recommendations which need to be progressed and enacted within the service. Now, the positive news is that 32 of those have now been completed and closed, and 21 continue to be worked on by the internal teams within NFRS. All of those recommendations are on track, they're all making progress. They are set to be completed by December of this year, and we report that they are making sufficient progress. In 2.4, it highlights some of the high-level areas which have been improved. Now, obviously, we can't go into detail on all of the areas which we've addressed, because many of them are to do with our response to a marauding terrorist attack, an MTA incident. But we have updated our operational policy and procedures in relation to our response to those types of incidents. We've carried out continuous training and provision in that area, as well as rolling out a new edition of national guidance in terms of how we would respond to a major incident of that type. Sadly, members will be aware, in June of last year we enacted those plans when we responded to the tragic triple murder that occurred in the city. That incident in the early stages was dealt as an MTA, a marauding terrorist attack incident. And what I am pleased to say is in the review of that incident, we carried out a number of actions which were direct learning from the Manchester Arena inquiry, but which really aided our response to that incident. particularly are working closely with Nottinghamshire Police. So things like sending one of our officers immediately at the start of that incident to co-locate with the police in their control room really meant that we had a very effective exchange of information. We were able to respond to that incident really effectively as a blue light partnership. So hopefully it gives members some reassurance that those action plans, we have a number of action plans in the service at any one time, but they really are making a difference in terms of how we respond to our communities. The second part of this also looks at the national learning and the National Fire Chiefs Council. This work, because of its significance, is being coordinated on a national basis. That is being tracked, and the scrutiny and oversight group has been established by the National Fire Chiefs Council. We are feeding into that, and our progress is being monitored nationally as well. As I touched on, the second piece of work is around the Local Resilience Forum, so the LRF, and that's where all of the Category 1 and Category 2 emergency responders, representatives of those meet on a frequent basis, both at a strategic level and then at practitioner levels as well, to make sure that we, as a collective blue light and emergency partners, are ready to respond to any foreseeable incidents. We have taken a lead on the implementation of the recommendations at an LRF level. I'm privileged to be the deputy chair for that group, and Chris Emmett, one of our group managers, has a significant role within the LRF and its wider engagement, and he is leading on this piece of work in terms of the Manchester Arena actions. With those, there are 55 actions which are across all blue light emergency responders, including local authorities, and 33 of those have now been completed and closed, with a further 22 progressing at the moment. There have been some challenges, as you can imagine, across all partners trying to get everybody into the same room. There was a huge piece of work to map out the current position of partners in terms of their emergency response. However, pleased to say that that has now all been undertaken, and again, the full completion is anticipated by December 2024, and we are confident that progress will be made to that point across the partners. So what we are continuing to do is to work internally, keep close scrutiny through our CRMP assurance board, chaired by the Chief Fire Officer, and also through the Local Resilience Forum to monitor progress against all of the actions and make sure that effective progress is being made. His Majesty's Inspectorate, as you'll be aware, is due to come and inspect us earlier this spring, around March time in this year, and one of their key areas where they're looking at will be around the progress against the Manchester Arena inquiry. And it's proposed that we continue to bring updates to members as we progress throughout this calendar year towards completion in December. What I will just finish on saying is that this really has driven our approach to MTA attacks. Thankfully low frequency but very, very high risk, so that risk that we faced in June of last year. And what we've arranged for members after the rising of this meeting today is just a bit of a show and tell from one of our group managers who is a NILO. So you may have seen in the media coverage when we attended that incident in the summer. And he'll be able to talk you through some of the equipment and capabilities that we have within the service for members as well. Happy to questions.
Thank you, Daniel. I must say, I was reading the top of page 28. I think it's pretty diabolical in this case. I mean, it's awful that we have to do this, so it's pretty diabolical that the government has taken 60-something% of the funding away for this sort of tragedy, all the protection services that we'll need. When we've seen things in Nottingham like we did last year, Manchester, it's clearly a requirement for us to do it and for us to have to mainline more funding. Even if it's only 40,000, it's still an extra pressure when, as Nick said earlier, we've got other things like more high-rise flats going up and everything else that we're trying to do. Just beggars belief. That's my thoughts. Does anybody else have any points specifically on this work? Nick?
I think it's difficult, as you were saying. I mean, based on I'd seen that, and I was thinking, when you look at the phrase marauding terrorist attack, obviously things have changed now. I mean, the original attack was targeted at an event which mainly is attended by teenage girls and their families, wasn't it? It's obviously, you know, completely despicable, and it's working out where the level of threat is. We've got the arena, a number of venues where you'd see cultural events. Obviously, we've got sporting facilities and so on, and international sporting facilities, and then of course marauding terrorists, when you think about that now, could be any means, but the people using cars, attacking people with knives. I mean, the variables are massive, aren't they? I mean, what concerns me at the moment is that the world's getting more unstable as we speak, and we're facing threats. So you would think that the funding should be commensurate with what level of threat we're in. And I think when you walk around this building, it's a lot higher level than it's been in the past due to international events. So it's a concern, and obviously praise I think we should, you know, we're going to go without praising the Blue Light Services for what they did in June, which is an appalling tragedy in our city when people ran towards danger, not knowing if there was a marauding terrorist attack or multiple, perhaps terrorists. And it's something that you forget, that we have these services and we ask our staff to go into situations where they are in fact dangerous. And I know there was some criticism in Manchester, but firefighters and police went into a situation there where there could have been more devices, there could have been other terrorists. You know, people do literally risk their lives, and I think we should note that.
Chair, as you'll be aware, the threat level remains substantial, and the risk of attack is likely on a national level. We see the ongoing events in the Middle East, which will have an effect on the threat level here in the UK as well. I think in terms of the funding from April, and I know we're coming up to budget setting period for members and Finance Resources Committee in full authority, it does present a burden, an additional burden, which is not currently funded, and we've got to find from existing budget. So there is a challenge, but from my perspective, it's one of the greatest risks that our firefighters will put themselves towards. And I want to, we will be assured to continue the level of exercise and the level of training and the level of equipment that we need to make sure we keep them safe. So it is a central area to where we continue to find that funding, but as in many areas, we continue to see challenges in terms of budgets.
Thank you. Anyone else on this paper? A sad paper in many respects, but essential, so thank you for presenting it, David. I think that was the final item. So with your indulgence, everyone, I'll close the meeting. Please do stay behind and let's be educated on the equipment at the back. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.